I was Goofy at Walt Disney World for over 20 years. AMA. This post is not for those who wish to preserve the Disney magic. If you'd like to preserve the magical guest experience at the Disney theme parks, I suggest you stop reading now. Hi there. This is me and it's nice to meet you. I worked at Walt Disney World for over 25 years. I was a bandit, gangster and tour guide at the Great Movie Ride, sold merchandise in a few stores, worked in guest services at the Polynesian, couldn't find any pics, then guest relations as a tour guide, but in 1996 I transferred to the character department and I never looked back. I know you guys are big on proof, so look at this, then look at this. Oh, here's some mega proof. Just for fun, here's a pic of me teaching the official Disney Princess Wave and playing before parade, me in the Mickey Mania parade, and here's me in the airport bringing in a plane for a press event. I'll answer any questions you might have unless they get too personal or weird. I know Reddit, so go ahead. Ask me anything. Edit. Before this post gets archived, I want to thank the Reddit community for giving me so much support and encouragement. I am truly honored to be among you. I'm truly touched by all of the gold you gave me for this comment. I'm glad you liked that story. Above all, I sincerely want to thank you for what you did for the Florida hospital. It was truly inspirational and it brought me so much joy. Now, as Mickey would say, see ya real soon. Edit 2. I found 2 videos of me performing Goofy in case you're interested. Clip 1, long. Clip 2, short. Do you smile in the costume when you're taking photos with other people? Thank you for preserving the grocery store magic. Almost every time. I need to know this. Op PLS respond, our lives are at stake. Edit. Holy crap, my first Reddit gold. I am so honored. How I feel right now is best expressed by Mickey and friends. Thank you, kind stranger. Gooby PLS. Any good stories about your magical moments? In 20 years surely you got some good ones. I have one moment that stands out above all the rest. I was waiting for someone to ask me this question. It's the reason I left a good job as a VIP tour guide and moved to the character department. I was working City Hall one day when 2 guests came in with 2 little girls. One was in a wheelchair and the other one looked like she had just seen death. Both were cut and bruised, and the one in the wheelchair had her arm in a cast. The 2 women were actually nurses from a hospital and were asking for a refund on the girls' tickets, something we avoided doing at all costs. When I asked why, they told me the story. The 2 girls were with their mom and dad at Epcot, and on the way home they got into a horrible car accident. The mother was beheaded right in front of them. The father eventually died too, but the 2 girls didn't know that yet. They were from overseas and had no money and no contact information for anyone they knew. They were bringing the tickets back to get the girls some much-needed money to help get them back home. My heart absolutely sunk. If you had seen these girls, you'd know why. They were truly traumatized. I refunded their tickets and got permission to be their private tour guide for the rest of the day, which they were not expecting. I walked them to the VIP viewing area for the parade, which was as far as I could walk them in the costume we used to wear at City Hall. I had to leave them there while I put on my VIP costume. On the way down I pulled out every kid joke I could think of. I was a really good tour guide, I helped write part of it, and I knew how to make kids smile. Nothing worked. These girls were too far gone for that. I left them at the bridge to go change, walked backstage and bawled my eyes out. I just had never seen something so horrible. I was truly affected, and it was a terrible feeling of powerlessness not being able to fix the situation. When I came back I brought them to get ice cream, take them on rides and stuff, but they never smiled, not once. The nurses were loving it and were trying to get them into it, but it just wasn't working. We went back to the bridge to watch the parade. It was there that I honestly saw true magic. Real magic, not bullshit. I had called the parade department to let them know what was going on and set up a private meet and greet after the parade. As the parade was coming around Liberty Square, I told the girls that I had called Mickey and told him all about them. I told them that Mickey asked to meet them after the parade. The little girl in the wheelchair smiled. Really? She asked. My heart skipped. Yes, really. He told me to tell you to look out for him in the parade and to follow the float back to City Hall. The other girl smiled. You mean right now? She asked. It had worked. They were talking. Not laughing, but talking. It was the first time I had heard them speak. Every single parade performer came up to them on the bridge and told them to look out for Mickey. Every one of them told them that. When Mickey's float came up, Mickey, who was attached to a pole at the top of the float, managed to turn her body sideways, look down at the girls and point towards Main Street. That was all it took. The girls were excited. Now, they had forgotten about death. They were lost in a magical world and I couldn't believe I was watching it unfold in front of my eyes. We followed that float all the way back to City Hall, singing Mickey Mania the whole way. Back then, City Hall used to have a VIP lounge behind the desk that was for privacy during difficult situations or to host celebrities. I took them in and showed them the book where all of the autographs were. They were eating it up. The girl who was Mickey that day got down off her float and without even taking her head off walked up to me backstage and said, "Let's go." I walked in with Mickey behind me so I got to see the exact moment the girls met their new friend. They got shy but Mickey was in control now. Those girls met the real Mickey Mouse that day. Every single parade character stayed dressed to meet those girls. One by one they'd come in and play a bit then leave. We were in that lounge for over an hour. Mickey stayed in costume the entire time, which is hard to do after a parade. When Mickey finally said goodbye I had two excited girls on my hands that couldn't stop smiling. They talked and talked and talked. We had a wonderful day after that, but what I remember most is when we walked by the rose garden. The older one said, "Oh, my mommy loves roses." And she stopped. I held out my hand and walked her to the gate, picked her up and put her on the other side and said, "Pick one." She looked happy as she picked out her favorite rose. She didn't say anything more and she didn't need to. I said goodbye to the wonderful nurses and the wonderful girls, then walked backstage behind the train station. This time I didn't cry. It felt so good to be a part of that. I realized that as much as I liked helping guests at City Hall, the true magic of Disney was in the character department. I auditioned, transferred and never looked back. Thanks for letting me relive this. It was a special day for me. Is it true that someone gets fired if two of the same characters appear in the same area of the park? No. What happens is a child is selected at random from the affected crowd, given a loaded pistol, and told to kill the evil twin. The two character actors then are allowed to gesticulate wildly in an attempt to convince the armed youngster that they are in fact the real character. After the ordeal, the child is given a voucher for a supper in the Cinderella Castle's royal restaurant with the surviving character. The evil character's carcass is then carried away in an elaborate and whimsical marionette-style song and dance number and disposed of in that evening's Epcot firework extravaganza. How do you survive on really hot days? Practice actually. It was absolute torture the first month, and especially the first parade. But after a few months I got used to it and after a few years I would forget I had the costume on. Any good stories of playing Goofy around the time a Goofy movie came out? Bonus question. Have you ever met Powerline? Oh my God. The first time some kid asked me to do the perfect cast I had no idea what he was talking about so I faked it. The kid didn't buy it but luckily I had an escort, that's what they called attendance back in the day. Tell the kid that I already forgot it, which is bullshit if you watch the movie. They don't prepare you for details like that in training. You're just supposed to figure it out yourself. Never met Powerline unfortunately. Do the perfect cast here as a reference how that should look like. How did you do it, Op? I know this is going to get buried, but that's me and my sister in the photo you posted playing before the parade. That picture would have been taken in 1996. We'll post proof if I can find another image of my 10-year-old self. It really is a small world after all. Is that dog in the picture a good boy? That's my dog Max, named after Goofy's son. He's a very good boy. Why did you quit? I was fired. To make a complicated story short, Donald Duck was, as usual, being a jerk and wouldn't leave my area because I had signed Love, Goofy right over the bill of a Donald Duck hat. He threw a temper tantrum and as I was dragging him across the floor to get him back to his position a little kid ran out from behind the curtain at Pete's Silly Sideshow and we knocked her on her butt. The kid was fine and no one complained but Disney didn't really appreciate me dragging the costume on the carpeted floor so they terminated me. So you were terminated for dragging that jackass Donald Duck back to his area and out of your turf. Goofy's gangsta, y'all. Edit. AAAAND. My total karma has tripled in 3 hours. Thank you, Reddit, for the imaginary points. Laughing face, I have a new high score. A hyuk, a hyuk, a hyuk punk ass duck. That's a long and painful story. Disney still has no idea the pain and trauma that caused. There were other reasons I think I was not brought back, one of them being terrible legal advice from a lawyer I sought out before my final arbitration. I was also sort of a whistleblower, and I think that played a big role. Mickeyleaks. What is the weirdest request that a visitor ever asked you to do? A guy once asked me to choke him for a picture. I didn't. That's a hard one because guests routinely do stupid, weird things. I think the worst of them is when people bring their newborn infants to the parks and ask us to hold them for a picture. I can't see shit in Goofy, let alone other costumes, and I'm wearing giant gloves or paws or whatever depending on what character I am. Why would you let me hold your baby? Yeesh. What were your coworkers like? Is everyone filled with the Disney spirit, or do people hate their jobs there like any other job? It's really like any other job. I went through phases myself. At first, every time I farted pixie dust would blow out of my butt, but after several years I got kinda bitter. It was all management stuff though. On set I was fine and loved it, but backstage stress got to me for a while and I was big on holding Disney accountable. After about 10 years though I calmed down. I loved every single minute while on set, for the most part, and some of my coworkers will be friends for life. You get out of it what you put into it. What's the strangest thing you saw in the back of house areas? Oh my god, I could go on for days about that. One thing that stands out was a special event where they needed 16 Mickeys all set out in various rooms, and seeing all of them backstage was really weird. Do you prefer parents playing it straight or interacting with you in character, so to speak? For the most part, one appreciated when parents would stay in character. I hated when people would tell their kids it's just a guy in a suit, don't be scared, which scares the kids even more. What I didn't like was when they would drill me with trivia questions and make me act out the answers. That used to be fun in the old days, but toward the end we had to see as many guests as possible and there was always pressure from management to go faster and faster. Hey there, worst and best customer experience you ever had? Worst guest experience? It's a tie between having my life threatened at a grad night party one time and one time I had to tell a guest that their son was in jail for stealing from one of the stores and she did not take it very well. Best guest experience? I've got too many to mention. One that stands out is when I was working at Mickey's character spot at Epcot. There was an older gentleman that came up in the queue but didn't come see me. He just sort of stood in the back and watched me for a while. After about 20 minutes he came up to me and said, "Goofy, I had a special friend that would want you to have this." In Goofy you have to look down in order to make it look like Goofy is looking at you, so I couldn't see him but I heard him holding back the tears. He was shaking a bit but he gave me a hug anyway. I will never forget that hug. It was one of those hugs that last with you. He was crying in my arms. He had given me this, which is a pin they give to family members or friends of Pows and Mias. It's become one of my most prized possessions. Gosh, ma'am, looks like you sure do suck at raising kids. Your son is now in jail. Guh yuck. What, exactly, is Goofy? He's an anthropomorphic dog. Yes, we get that question a lot. So whenever you're standing next to Pluto, do you ever feel anthropomorphic dog Masterachi proud? What is your favorite memory working there? Sigh. I can't really figure that out. I've tried to answer that question 100 times but I can never pinpoint a specific moment that stands out from the rest. I have a few tearjerkers, a few laugh-out-loud moments, and a few horror stories. One that does stand out was at Give Kids the World, which is where all the Make-A-Wish kids stay when they come to Disney, truly a magical, spectacular place. A woman came up with her son who was born with a birth defect that meant he had no muscles in his neck. He looked really bad and his head had to be supported by his mom. This was a special circumstance. The kid's wish was to be held by Goofy. That's it. Just to be held. The mother told me that because of his life problems everyone is afraid to even touch him. She laid him very carefully in my arms, sitting on the ground, and let go. We rocked back and forth on that floor for what seemed forever. It was one of the times where I forgot I had the costume on and I just cried and cried. He was such a special kid. I'll never forget that. Wobbly. You said at one point you worked in merchandise. Would that possibly be in the Magic Kingdom side? There is one older gentleman, Bud, who changed my life. He held me while I cried and he cried with me about me recently deceased son. If he is one that you keep in touch with, please let him know how thankful I was for him that night. He saved me. I worked for Disney and merch at Magic Kingdom. Do you remember where in MK he worked? I'm still part of some Facebook groups for cast members, so I might be able to find him. Either way, if you want him to get recognized, write a letter or email to guest relations. It'll help if you know around when you met him and where he worked, so they can find him easier, but it means a lot for a CM to receive a guest letter. We get to take the letter home and get a certificate, and it's a really big deal that means a lot to CMs. It was the first store to the left on Main Street. It was November 30, 2016. I already wrote a review on Facebook mentioning him, but I'll write a letter for sure. The store you're talking about is the Emporium, and I actually worked there in the fall of 2015. When you mentioned Bud, I thought it sounded familiar, but now that I know it was the Emporium, I know exactly who you're talking about. I'm not sure if he has a Facebook, but I'm going to try and find him. Disney does monitor Facebook, so they might have seen it, but yeah, send a letter just to be sure. At the Emporium it's a pretty big deal. A leader will have an informal meeting, and the person being recognized gets called to the front as the letter is read out loud to everyone. It goes on our permanent record and is a great thing to have. Ever bang someone in the costume? No, and contrary to popular belief, there aren't many furries in the character department. I know there are a few, I knew one of them, but it's not something that's out in the open for sure. I know there are a few, I knew one of them. It's you, isn't it? Are the stereotypes about people who play different characters true? If you're talking about the face performers, the answer is yes and no. Some of the break rooms are like the high school cafeteria where the cool princesses, Elsa and Anna, sit on one side and make eyes at the old characters, Snow and Poppins. It's really childish. Other face performers think they're on Broadway and demand respect, and they hate not getting it. But those are extreme cases of a few bitches. For the most part, the face performers are as much a character as any of us. Some of them are the sweetest people I've ever met in my life. What's the worst child, adult tantrum you've witnessed? I once saw an adult beat the absolute living shit out of a pre-teen boy on set as the Queen of Hearts. We're told never to interact when something like that happens, so I had to leave. I've seen tons and tons of guests lose their shit in guest relations, particularly when it involved people not getting their way. I wish I had a camera sometimes. I would get so much delicious karma from our public freakout. Shit. That had to be traumatic for the kid. Not only he is beaten in public, but his childhood hero Goofy sees it and decide to turn around and walk away. He must felt betrayed. Are the Disney Corporation really as cold-heartedly capitalist as the adult me has been led to believe? Yes and no. Disney has lost their focus, and the old Disney cast members that held those old company values have all retired, but Disney is a great company to work for regardless. I can give you an example of how corporate Disney has taken over what I like to call traditional Disney. The place where all of the characters used to break was called the zoo. Everyone knew the characters as the zoo crew. If you wanted a character, you either called the headroom or the zoo. It was a Disney tradition and everyone got a kick out of it. Then this guy named David, who was the entertainment vice president, came in and didn't think that sounded too professional, so he changed the name to the base. Eventually all the zoo signs came down and were replaced. The zoo disappeared and it got sterile really quick. We used to have nice big couches to relax on, and David had them all thrown out and replaced by metal chairs. A part of the character department died that day. Anyway, they're way too concerned with numbers now. We used to just stroll the parks and play with people, but in the end we were all held accountable to see as many guests as we possibly could during our sets. They hound you to go faster and faster. They figured 23 seconds, a number I pulled out of my butt mind you, but I know it's under 30, is plenty of time to see a family of 4. I turned into an autograph machine towards the end, but I always stayed true to my character. A lot of performers don't do that anymore. It's sad. David sounds like a total cockweasel. What was the pay like? Must not have been too bad. Well, I had 25 years of seniority but only made about $15 an hour. Because Florida is a right-to-work state, the union is pretty much impotent there. It's not like California, they get paid way more. Edit. I stand corrected. Only equity characters make bank. The others are paid around the same as I was. Not sure of the details, but that's the gist I'm getting. Man. How can you justify doing that for 25 years at such a low pay rate? I don't mean to sound offensive. Please don't take it that way. The area around Disney World. A two-person household with each person making $14 to $15 is pretty livable, actually. There are quite a few single-earner households where making $15 per hour puts you comfortably working class. You know, not like living large, but not living hand-to-mouth either. No income tax, lots of affordable housing, and quite a few things to do in the outdoors, if that's your thing. It's pretty livable. There are hundreds of thousands of tourism-related workers in Central Florida doing exactly that. Edit. Livable. Don't push your limey spelling on me. Did you like Walt Disney World when you started this job? Do you still like it? What's your favorite thing at the parks that isn't around anymore? Loved it then and I love it now. I would have to say the hidden Mickey at the Disney MGM studios. The actual park used to make a giant Mickey Mouse when seen from an airplane. Echo Lake, where Gertie's is, made his right ear, and the place where that horrible hat was made up the nose. All of the expansions tore it all to shreds though. There are a lot of attractions I miss terribly though. Horizons was such a peaceful ride, and cool as shit, and Journey into Imagination with the original Figment had so many amazing tricks in it. I miss Delta Dreamflight and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride a lot too. For the curious. What is the weirdest story of one of your coworkers getting fired? What did they get fired for? Well, the worst I personally saw was in the 90s when Fantasyland Character Festival was still around, which was the old queue for 20K Leagues Under the Sea. One of our greeters, that's what they called them then, their attendants now, was a trans woman. That wasn't fooling anyone, and the police came and picked her up backstage. Evidently she was the father of a missing child and she was hiding out at Disney. Fucked up, huh? There was also the infamous Michael Chartrand case, who was the Tigger that felt up one of the guests. That was a really embarrassing blemish for Disney. It was on the front page of the Orlando Sentinel, which is plopped down on everyone's doorstep at Disney, in the premium resorts anyway. He got his job back. There was a totally bizarre court case. His lawyer actually dressed up as Tigger to give the closing arguments, but he was fired a few years later for allegedly doing the same thing to one of the photographers. That's what Tiggers do best. Dressed up like Tigger for closing arguments? Goodness, I want to see this. Link. Would you rather fight 100 Donald-sized Philippes or 1 Philippe-sized Donalds? The former. Donald is a tiny bitch. You are now banned from _Donald. What is your favorite Disney movie? Tough call. I'm really partial to The Little Mermaid because of Ursula, but I think all in all it has to be Ratatouille. That movie has some of my all-time favorite quotes, especially Anton Ego's SP speech at the end of the film. I also loved Dumbo, as racist as it was, but that's because Timothy Q. Mouse is probably my favorite character of all. These are weird ways to say Lilo, Stitch and Atlantis, the Lost Empire. If Goofy and Pluto are both dogs, then how come Pluto has to live in a doghouse while Goofy plays golf with Mickey? Goofy is better at golf. Hi, thanks for the AMA. Has a cast member's head, or glove, shoe, something, ever fallen off while out in the park? How does WDW deal with that if it happens? Also, can you talk about the process to learn to do Goofy's signature? I guess I've never compared them across multiple members, but are the signatures standardized, and do you have to have your ability to sign as your character tested in any way? Can answer this. Was friends with Goofy for a brief time. In any public forum, you're supposed to say you are friends with the character you portray in order to avoid implying they are anything less than real, for the benefit of anyone who wants to preserve the magic, i.e. the children. If any part of your costume starts to get loose, you are to place one hand over your eye. Your character attendant says, "Goofy, do you have something in your eye?" You nod, and your character attendant escorts you off stage to fix the problem. Of course, this is the ideal situation. As far as signatures go, it's just practice, practice, practice. This is especially true for Goofy. Your eyes are Goofy's mouth. Goofy's eyes are up above your head. When taking pictures or stuff like that, you look at people's feet so that Goofy can look them in the eye. When signing, Goofy has to be looking at the book, not you. Have to hold your arms way above your head and sign without looking. So that's how you have to practice too. That's some strong parenthesis game in the first paragraph, my dude. Edit. Holy shit, you, Goofy 2016's comment was way too interesting for this to be the top reply to it. Lol. They have to attempt to mimic the character's signature to the best of their ability. You sign so much though, it becomes second nature. Wife was Sleeping Beauty for 3 years. Wife was Sleeping Beauty for 3 years. I hope that's not a euphemism. Where do you go in your career from here? That's how this whole AMA started. I made a comment in our Advice Animals in response to someone who was frustrated they were 30 and making a career change. I'm 46 now. I have zero job skills other than making people laugh. I never thought I'd ever do anything else, so I'm stuck. Maybe working with troubled teens or some other kind of service work. I just want to find something that gives me as much passion as Disney did, which is hard. I really hope you see this. I think I may have the perfect career transition for you. Florida has a large military presence. You could work for one of the many MWR, morale, welfare, and recreation, programs and help out veterans with PTSD and depression. I think your experience in working for Disney all those years could translate very well into doing something like that. I'm a disabled vet. Things like this are great, but doing MWR stuff would help with kids as well. Cheering up family of a lost soldier is something that is hard to do. There are service members out there that have lost hope. Who better than you to restore their faith in humanity? Edit. Spelling. Edit 2. Added OP's username in the hopes he sees the comment. Thank you, Coldforged Edit 3. Quoted, Gizzard_of_Oz, S amazing comment.